Ethan stepped off the shuttle onto the gleaming platform of Lumeria, his heart pounding. He had seen pictures of the planet in human space archives, but nothing compared to the sight before him. Towering crystal spires caught the sunlight and scattered rainbows across the sky. Floating gardens drifted gently above the streets, their roots suspended in glowing blue energy. Alien citizens, tall and graceful, moved silently among each other, their skin shimmering in faint colors that shifted with emotion. Ethan, a human engineer and explorer, could hardly believe he was here. He adjusted his uniform, trying to look calm, but his hands trembled slightly. Humans were still rare visitors on Lumeria. The palace he was about to enter was the home of Princess Lyra, heir to the Lumerian throne. He had been invited as part of a diplomatic team, tasked with inspecting some newly built energy conduits the humans had helped design. It sounded simple enough, but the reality was overwhelming. A Lumerian guide approached, bowing slightly. "Welcome, human engineer. I am Tiras, your liaison. The princess is expecting you shortly." His voice was smooth, musical, yet formal. Ethan nodded and tried to keep pace as Tiras led him into the palace. The halls were breathtaking. Walls made of translucent crystal reflected the ambient light in soft waves. Strange hovering lights drifted lazily above them, illuminating ancient murals that depicted Lumeria's history wars, explorations, and peaceful alliances with neighboring planets. Ethan marveled at the details, noting how everything seemed alive. It's almost like the building itself was breathing. Finally, they arrived at a grand chamber. At the far end stood Princess Lyra. She was taller than most humans, slim, with flowing hair that shimmered between silver and lavender in the light. Her eyes were deep, violet, intelligent, and watchful, observing Ethan the moment he stepped in. She wore ceremonial robes, embroidered with patterns that seemed to move subtly, like liquid light. Ethan froze, not knowing where to look. He had prepared a polite greeting, something formal yet respectful, but all his rehearsed words fled. Instead, he blurted out without thinking, "Your robes. They are really beautiful." For a moment, the room went silent. Ethan's stomach sank. Did he just say the wrong thing? His voice had been casual, almost nervous, but in Lumerian culture. Words of admiration were not simple compliments. They were binding social gestures, almost like a pledge. Princess Lyra blinked once slowly and then smiled. A soft, almost imperceptible glow ran through her robes. Ethan noticed that her eyes sparkled with curiosity. "You find them beautiful?" she asked, her voice gentle but carrying weight. Ethan swallowed hard. "I mean, yes. They are elegant. Very elegant." He tried to smile, hoping it would show politeness rather than panic. Lyra tilted her head, studying him closely. "Human. Do you understand what your words mean in our culture?" she asked. Ethan's mind raced. I'm afraid I do not. He stopped. "I just meant they look nice. I didn't mean anything else." The princess's eyes softened, though there was a twinkle of amusement. In Lumeria, a spoken compliment of this kind is considered a formal engagement gesture. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Engagement. His mind blanked. "Wait. I didn't—" Lyra's smile widened, still polite, still amused, but there was authority behind it. "You have accepted the custom, human. You are now pledged to learn our ways and prepare for the ceremony." Ethan's knees nearly buckled. He had traveled across the stars, explored unknown planets, and repaired ships in zero gravity, but this was terrifying. I think there's been a mistake," he said, his voice cracking slightly. Tira stepped forward. "No mistake, human. Your words were binding. The princess is gracious. She will guide you through the preparations. But you must comply with our traditions." Ethan nodded slowly, though panic and disbelief warred in his mind. He was about to be engaged to an alien princess because of a single compliment. He could hardly understand the palace rules, let alone the political consequences. Over the next hours, Ethan was shown to a private wing of the palace where he would begin his preparation. His room was spacious, with walls of crystal that shifted color according to the time of day. A small desk contained documents explaining Lumerian customs, rituals, and the expected etiquette. The palace staff moved silently around him. Setting out clothing and instructional materials, Princess Lyra visited him later in the evening. She walked into the room with the same calm grace as before, carrying a small device that glowed softly. "We will begin your instruction," she said. "It is important you understand every detail. Even minor mistakes can have consequences." Ethan swallowed. "I will do my best," he said, trying to sound confident. Lyra smiled faintly. "Your honesty is unusual among Lemurians. That is why I find you interesting." "Interesting?" "Yes," she said simply, as if it were obvious. "You are not like our trained diplomats. You are human. You are direct, unpolished, yet sincere. This quality may serve you well." Ethan felt a strange mix of relief and anxiety. On one hand, it was nice to hear she found him interesting. On the other, he was still terrified of failing in the eyes of an entire civilization. The next day, his training began. The first lesson was simple: how to bow, gesture, and speak in Lemurian. Every movement had to be precise. A wrong gesture could signal disrespect or worse. Ethan tried, stumbled, and tried again, often making Lyra smile despite his mistakes. "You are clumsy, human," she said lightly during one session, "but you have persistence." "That is good." Ethan laughed nervously. "I guess persistence is all I have right now." Lyra's smile widened. "We will see if that is enough." As the week passed, Ethan began to notice small things about the princess that made him curious. She was intelligent, patient, and had a subtle humor that few humans might recognize. She asked questions about human life, technology, and culture, and listened intently to his answers. In return, she taught him about Lemurian history, their values, and why traditions mattered so deeply. One afternoon, while walking in the palace gardens, Ethan nearly tripped over a floating flower root. Lyra laughed a melodic, soft sound and helped steady him. "You are very human," she said, shaking her head in amusement. "You stumble, yet you continue forward. That is rare in Lumeria." Ethan smiled, despite himself. "I guess humans are built to keep going." She studied him for a moment. "Perhaps that is why you have survived so long in the galaxy. Humans endure, and they do not always follow predictable rules. That can be advantageous." As days turned into weeks, Ethan began to realize that what had started as a terrifying accident was becoming something meaningful. He was learning to navigate Lumerian society, building trust with Lyra, and discovering that humans could adapt in ways even advanced alien civilizations did not expect. However, the palace was not without tension. Some advisors whispered about the unusual engagement, questioning why a human had been pledged to the princess. Ethan overheard fragments of conversation, doubt, caution, and even fear. He realized that beyond learning customs and etiquette, he would also need to prove himself capable of honoring the engagement in ways that went beyond tradition. One evening, Lyra summoned him to the council chamber. "Human," she said quietly, "you have begun well, but you must understand. Engagement is not a joke. It is a commitment. Are you willing to learn, to respect, and to walk this path beside me?" Ethan took a deep breath. I will do my best. I may not understand everything yet, but I will try." Lyra nodded, a faint smile touching her lips. Then we continue. "You may stumble, human, but your sincerity has value. That is why you were chosen. Or perhaps why you were not avoided." Ethan left the chamber with a strange mixture of pride and fear. He was still terrified of the obligations, the customs, and the political implications. But he also felt something else's sense of purpose. He had accidentally complimented a princess and now stood on the threshold of a new life. One filled with unknown challenges, lessons, and perhaps friendship or more. As the twin suns of Lumeria set behind the crystalline spires, casting long, colorful shadows across the city, Ethan looked out the window of his chamber. He realized that he was not just a visitor anymore. He was part of the story, now a human in a world of aliens. a human who had been chosen in a way no one could have predicted. And somewhere deep inside, he wondered if this strange, accidental engagement might just become something extraordinary. Ethan woke early to the soft hum of Lumeria's palace. The walls of his room glowed faintly with shifting colors, signaling the morning light. Today was going to be challenging. Princess Lyra had scheduled another session to teach him Lumerian etiquette, ceremony procedures, and the nuances of engagement obligations. He dressed carefully in the robes provided for him. The fabric was lighter than human clothing and shimmered with subtle energy, reacting to his movements. Every time he adjusted it incorrectly, the fabric would emit a soft, almost musical tone, signaling that he needed to correct it. Ethan shook his head, laughing softly. "Even my clothes are judging me," he muttered. When he entered the training hall, Lyra was already there, standing with perfect posture. Her eyes followed him with quiet amusement. "Human," she said, "today we begin the formal greeting ritual. This is how you will meet important dignitaries, not just me. Your posture, gestures, and tone must be precise." Ethan nodded. "Understood. I'll do my best." Lyra guided him step by step, showing how to bow, how to extend his hands, and the exact way to speak the ceremonial greetings. Ethan tried to memorize everything, but his human instincts sometimes got in the way. When he bowed too low or stretched his hand too far, Lyra would correct him gently, though her faint smile betrayed her amusement. "You are stubborn, human," she said once. "But you improve faster than expected." Ethan felt a small surge of pride. For a human who had grown up repairing ships and dealing with machines, this was entirely different. Here, he needed patience, attention to detail, and subtle understanding of body language. But he noticed that Lyra was patient and encouraging. It's not harsh like some of the older Lumerians. After several hours, they moved outside to the palace gardens. The floating plants cast gentle shadows on the crystal paths, and small streams of glowing water trickled along carved channels. Here, Lyra explained the gesture of mutual respect used during private meetings in Lumeria. "You must understand, Ethan," she said, her voice calm. "Every action carries meaning. A gesture can signify respect, affection, or offense. Humans often act instinctively, but on Lumeria, instinct can mislead." Ethan nodded. "I think I'm starting to understand." "A little." Lyra studied him carefully. "You were honest, and that will help. Humans are unpredictable, but your sincerity is clear. That is rare in our world." As the days passed, Ethan's training continued. Each day brought new lessons: the proper way to walk through palace corridors, how to serve Lumerian tea, how to respond to subtle questions from advisors, and even how to display composure during ceremonial inspections. He stumbled often, but he learned quickly. During one afternoon session, an important advisor visited the gardens. Ethan had to demonstrate his understanding of the greetings and gestures he had been practicing. He tried to recall every detail, but the advisor's piercing gaze made him nervous. His hand trembled slightly as he extended it. He bowed slightly too far. Lyra's eyes flicked toward him, and she whispered softly, "Hold steady. Remember your training." Ethan took a deep breath, straightened, and repeated the gestures more confidently. The advisor raised an eyebrow, studying him for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he nodded slightly. Ethan exhaled silently, relief flooding through him. After the advisor left, Lyra placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. "You see, human? You can handle challenges that seem impossible at first. That is a quality worth respecting." Ethan smiled, feeling a growing sense of accomplishment. He began to realize that Lyra wasn't just his teacher. She was watching for character, not just performance. Beyond the formal lessons, the palace introduced Ethan to the daily life of Lemurians. He walked through markets with Lyra, observing how citizens interacted. He learned about their energy systems, transportation, and technology. Lemurians moved silently, but their efficiency and intelligence were clear. Yet Ethan noticed something unusual. His human creativity seemed to stand out among them. One day, a small problem occurred in the palace's energy grid. A floating garden's roots were beginning to lose balance, threatening to fall. Lemurian engineers were already working on a solution, but the problem was delicate. They needed someone who could think outside of their standard protocols. Ethan watched the engineers, then stepped forward cautiously. "Have you considered rebalancing the energy flow through the secondary nodes instead of the main ones?" he asked. The engineers exchanged puzzled looks. Lyra stepped forward, intrigued. "Explain, human." Ethan walked to the control panel and carefully demonstrated his idea. Slowly, the engineers realized it would work. With Ethan's suggestion, the floating garden stabilized. Lyra's eyes sparkled with approval. "You see, human? Sometimes rules are not enough. Imagination can solve problems even the most experienced cannot." The palace staff murmured quietly among themselves. Whispers spread that the human was not just a visitor, but a capable contributor. Ethan felt pride swell in his chest, yet he remained humble. He was still learning, still unsure. But the Lemurians began to see him differently. Meanwhile, Ethan and Lyra spent more time together outside of formal lessons. They explored hidden palace chambers, observed the floating gardens, and sometimes sat quietly, watching the twin suns of Lumeria set over crystalline spires. Lyra asked him questions about Earth, human history, and life beyond the stars. Ethan responded honestly, sharing stories of human struggles and triumphs. "You speak with courage," Lyra said one evening, as they walked along a crystal path. "Humans face challenges differently. You do not always follow the expected path, yet you endure." "That is admirable." Ethan smiled, feeling a warmth he had not expected. "I guess humans survive by trying, even when things seem impossible," Lyra nodded. "Perhaps that is why your presence here is significant. You remind us that even advanced civilizations can learn from a species that never gives up. Despite their growing connection, challenges arose. Some Lemurians viewed the engagement as unusual, questioning why a human had been chosen. Ethan overheard advisors discussing his presence, doubts about his ability to understand Lemurian culture, and concerns that the engagement could create political complications. One afternoon, while walking through a palace corridor, Ethan noticed a group of advisors whispering. "He is unpredictable," one said. "Can he uphold the customs? Can he endure the duties?" Ethan felt a pang of worry. Lyra's hand rested lightly on his arm. "Do not worry, human," she whispered. "You must only be yourself. That is enough for now. Actions speak louder than words." Her words comforted him. He realized that his human qualities, curiosity, honesty, and creativity were actually strengths in this world. If he relied on what made him human, he could earn respect, not just compliance. The days grew longer as Ethan continued his preparation. He practiced speeches, gestures, and ceremonial movements until muscle memory took over. Lyra occasionally challenged him with unexpected scenarios, unexpected questions from guests, simulated emergencies, or adjustments in ritual timing. Ethan learned to adapt quickly, using his human intuition and calm under pressure to succeed. One night, the palace held a small diplomatic gathering. Humans and Lemurians mingled, and Ethan had to interact with several high-ranking officials. He felt nervous but remembered Lyra's advice: be honest, show respect, and observe carefully. During the gathering, a Lemurian ambassador approached him, testing his knowledge of customs. Ethan answered carefully, combining what he had learned with his own understanding of logic and human reasoning. The ambassador raised an eyebrow in surprise, and then gave a subtle nod of approval. Lyra watched him from across the room, her expression soft. She was impressed not only by his knowledge but by his ability to remain calm and thoughtful under pressure. After the gathering, Lyra and Ethan walked through the palace gardens. "You are improving, human," she said quietly. "Some Lemurians still doubt, but you are beginning to prove yourself. That is rare." Ethan laughed softly. "I'm still learning, Lyra. I still make mistakes every day." "You do," she admitted, "but you correct them. You try again. That is more valuable than perfection. Remember this, human. Sincerity and courage often matter more than skill alone." By the end of the second week, Ethan began to notice subtle changes in Lyra's demeanor. She laughed more easily at his mistakes, seemed genuinely curious about his thoughts, and occasionally showed small gestures of trust, allowing him to make decisions during training. asking for his opinion on palace matters. And sharing stories of her own childhood, Ethan realized that the accidental compliment that had started this journey was no longer the defining moment. Now it was about trust, respect, and mutual learning. One evening, as they watched the twin suns dip below the horizon, Ethan turned to Lyra. "I still can't believe this is happening," he admitted. Lyra smiled faintly. "Neither could I, human. But sometimes the unexpected reveals the truth about people. You are not perfect, but you are genuine. That is why this engagement matters. Not the words that began it, but the actions that follow." Ethan nodded, feeling a strange sense of calm. He had survived challenges he never imagined, learned customs that seemed impossible at first, and even earned respect in a world so different from his own. And somewhere deep inside, he realized that he might actually be ready for what came next. The day of the engagement ceremony arrived. The palace was alive with color, light, and anticipation. Crystal spires reflected the twin suns, casting long rainbows across the city. Floating gardens hovered gracefully above the streets, their roots glowing softly. Lemurians from across the planet had come to witness the unusual event, human being formally engaged to Princess Lyra. Ethan stood in his ceremonial robes, the fabric shimmering as it adjusted to his movements. His hands were steady now, the lessons of the past weeks finally taking root. Yet inside, his heart pounded with nervous excitement. This was not just about following instructions or performing rituals. Today, he had to prove himself to Lyra, to her people, and even to himself. Lyra appeared at the end of the hall, her presence commanding yet gentle. She wore a gown of liquid crystal that glowed softly with her emotions. The intricate patterns shifted subtly, and the effect was breathtaking. She noticed Ethan and gave a faint nod, a small sign of encouragement. The ceremony began with the procession of light, where attendants carried floating orbs that illuminated the hall. Ethan followed the sequence he had memorized, bowing and extending his hands at the correct moments. Every motion mattered. Every gesture spoke volumes. Some Lemurians whispered among themselves, curious about the human. Could he truly honor their customs? Could he maintain composure under pressure? Ethan felt their scrutiny, but instead of fear, he drew strength from what he had learned. He was not just performing, he was showing that humans could adapt, learn, and respect alien ways. When it was time for the central ritual, Lyra and Ethan faced each other on a raised platform. The crowd watched in silence as they recited the ceremonial words, a mix of Lemurian and the human language. Ethan stumbled slightly on the pronunciation, but Lyra smiled gently and adjusted his tone with a subtle nod. "You are doing well, human," she whispered. "Focus on sincerity, not perfection." Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. He understood that the ritual was about trust, respect, and partnership, not just flawless execution. He straightened, recited the words carefully, and extended his hand toward Lyra with calm confidence. The princess mirrored his gesture. Light seemed to flow from their hands, connecting them briefly in a shimmering bridge that symbolized unity and commitment. The crowd gasped softly, witnessing a human and a Lemurian princess bound together by culture, ceremony, and growing mutual respect. After the ritual, the Council of Elders stepped forward. They were the most respected figures in Lemuria, responsible for ensuring that all ceremonies were legitimate and meaningful. One elder, an imposing figure with translucent skin and shifting patterns, studied Ethan carefully. "You have learned well, human," the elder said. "You have shown understanding, sincerity, and courage. These are qualities worthy of the princess and of Lemuria." Ethan felt a wave of relief. He had feared that no matter how hard he tried, he might fail. But now, in front of the entire court, he realized that his human qualities were valued here, not just tolerated. Lyra's eyes met his. There was a soft glow of pride and approval, a silent acknowledgement that he had passed more than just the ceremonial tests. He had earned her respect and trust. Next came the exchange of promises, a deeply personal ritual. Each participant spoke words that represented their intentions, not just in the present, but for the future. Ethan's turn came. He He looked at Lyra and spoke with careful honesty. I do not fully understand everything about your world, or all the traditions, but I promise to learn, to respect, and to stand by you. I will do my best to honor this bond, not because it is required, but because I believe it is right. The crowd remained silent, absorbing his words. Some humans might have thought his speech simple, but in Lemurian culture, truth and sincerity outweighed complexity. Lyra responded with a soft smile, placing her hand over his. I accept your promise. Ethan, your words reflect your heart, not just your mind. That is more than enough. As the ceremony continued, Ethan noticed the subtle changes in the crowd's demeanor. Initially skeptical advisors now nodded in approval. Lemurian citizens whispered about the human's courage and honesty. Even those who had doubted him began to see that humans could embody values that transcended culture adaptability, integrity, and courage. After the formal ceremony, the celebration began. The palace gardens were filled with glowing lights, music that flowed like liquid and floating lanterns. Humans and Lemurians mingled together, sharing food, stories, and laughter. Ethan walked beside Lyra, marveling at the blend of cultures. He had always thought humans were small players in the galaxy, but here, he realized that human qualities could inspire respect and admiration, even among advanced civilizations. Lyra leaned close to him, her voice soft. You surprised me, Ethan. I did not expect a human to navigate our rituals so well. More importantly, I did not expect you to endure and adapt. That is rare, Ethan smiled, feeling warmth he had never known in a palace full of aliens. I just tried to be honest and do my best. You taught me how to focus, how to respect, and how to think beyond instinct. I guess that made the difference. The princess laughed softly, a sound like wind chimes. Perhaps, but it is your courage, not just your lessons, that made this possible. You have earned a place here, Ethan, the night continued. The festivities grew more elaborate. Music unlike anything Ethan had heard filled the gardens. Lemurian instruments created sounds that shifted with emotion, responding to the crowd's mood. Floating lights danced above them, following the rhythm of the melodies. Humans and aliens alike marveled at the spectacle. During the celebrations, a minor crisis arose. A floating platform supporting a section of the gardens began to tilt dangerously. Lemurian engineers rushed to stabilize it, but the energy nodes were unstable. Without hesitation, Ethan assessed the situation. He quickly instructed the engineers to reroute energy through secondary channels while manually adjusting the floating platform's balance. Using a combination of human intuition and the knowledge he had gained of Lemurian systems, he stabilized the platform just in time. Lyra observed from the edge of the crowd, her eyes wide with admiration. Human ingenuity, she whispered. Even in the middle of celebration, you act with calm and intelligence. The crowd noticed too. Whispers spread that the human not only respected Lemurian culture, but actively contributed to its safety and well-being. Ethan felt a quiet pride, understanding that he had moved from an outsider to a respected member of this world. As the celebration settled into the evening, Lyra took Ethan aside to a quiet balcony overlooking the palace. The twin moons of Lemuria rose, casting silver light over the crystal spires. You have done well, Ethan, she said. You were not expected to succeed so fully, yet you have proven that humans are capable, adaptable, and sincere. I am glad you are here. Ethan looked at her, the words of the first day returning to him. The accidental compliment that had started this journey now seemed small compared to what they had both achieved. I never imagined this, he said quietly. I was terrified at first, but now I feel like I belong here. With you and with your people. Lyra smiled softly, her hand brushing against his. And perhaps that is the lesson of this engagement, human. Sometimes, what begins as a mistake leads to understanding, growth, and connection. You have shown me that humans are more than we imagined. Ethan felt a strange warmth in his chest. He realized that his journey was more than about surviving alien customs. It was about building trust, respect, and friendship that could grow into something deeper. He had been tested, guided, and even laughed at. But in every challenge, he had found a new strength. The ceremony and celebrations had ended, But Ethan knew this was just the beginning. He would continue to learn, adapt, and grow alongside Lyra. They would face new challenges together, but he now understood that human courage, ingenuity, and sincerity could shine anywhere in the galaxy as they stood side by side. Watching the twin moons reflect on the Crystal City, Ethan realized something important. The accidental compliment that had terrified him was not an ending, but a doorway. It had opened a path to friendship, understanding, and perhaps even love. And in that moment, he knew one thing with certainty. He was ready for whatever the future held. Not as a visitor, but as a human who had earned respect in a world far beyond Earth. The palace lights shimmered, the floating gardens glowed softly, and the stars above Lumeria seemed to twinkle with approval. For Ethan, the journey from terrified human to respected partner of a princess had come full circle, and the adventure had only just begun.